Mind Your Farm Business on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by RBC Royal Bank.
Welcome to another episode of the Mind Your Farm Business podcast, brought to you by RBC Royal Bank. I'm your host, Shaun Haney of RealAgriculture.com and host of Real Ag Radio on Rural Radio 147 Sirius XM. Farm succession and transition. Two words that can honestly just strike fear, avoidance, or even outright frustration into the hearts of farm families all over Canada and the United States. It's not just about the handling over the farm. It's about financial security, fairness, equality, and ensuring that the next generation is set up for success. It's the most important part. But despite knowing how important it is, so many farm families still, they put it off. It's procrastination. That's why we're bringing back Elaine Froese, renowned farm family coach, speaker, and author. She's going to help us break down the barriers to progress. Why does procrastination take hold when it comes to farm succession? What's really preventing these conversations from happening? And most importantly, how can families move forward in a way that preserves relationships and strengthens the farm business? If you've been stuck in the endless loop of we'll get to it after seeding, after harvest, maybe after Christmas, this episode of the Mind Your Farm Business podcast is for you. Let's get started. Elaine, it's great to have you back on the Mind Your Farm Business podcast.
Great to be here.
Well, it's been a little while, but I would say this. The challenges around farm succession and transition still exists, Elaine. We haven't gotten rid of this problem yet.
Which is why I now have a team of 5 coaches, and they're sharing the load in terms of managing all those requests. So what is the key problem, Shaun?
Is it okay? So you're asking me. Okay. Well, I'm supposed to ask the questions, Elaine, but
Okay, so you put it around.
I think, honestly, I think a big part of the challenge here is the procrastination component. It's the getting started. It's there's on the farm. Listen, there and this is an entrepreneur issue. So there's always trying parts of the calendar. But let's just use an ag example for a second here, where it's once seeding is done. Once harvest is done. Hey, once calving is over. Well, wait a minute here. We got everybody coming here for Thanksgiving. We just don't want to have this discussion around there. Oh, and then there's Christmas. And then, you know what? We're back into January, February. It's almost seeding time. We got to focus on that after seeding is done. And then the cycle repeats itself. I think that's pretty common.
Yeah, and what you've just portrayed is exactly what I act out. Did that just this past week when I was with Maine dairy farmers in Ohio, Eastern Ohio, for the Women in Ag Conference. So procrastination and conflict avoidance continues to be killing agriculture or thwarting people's plans. You also use the phrase getting started. And I think that these day seminars that I've been doing with different ag groups, here's 3 words for your listeners to hang on to: income stream, housing, fairness. And so we have a coach, and our coach asked Wes, how much money do you want to make? He said $120,000 a year would be good. Where do you want to live? Well, wherever Elaine is. Good answer. Third question is, and how much do you want to work? I want to work when I want to work and not work when I don't want to work. And Ian can go and start the semi when it's minus 42. Now, the fairness issue in our family is a bit different because we have one successor who is our son and daughter-in-law, and we have a daughter who is a vulnerable person and cannot work full time. And so we have a Henson Trust for her. So our succession plan is well underway. Why am I telling this story? Because people tend to think it's too complicated. So getting to the table to talk, Shaun, about what you want your life to look like on the farm, stepping back without stepping away, which is Dick Whitman's term, is really about mom and dad actually don't agree. So here's first part of procrastination. Unbeknownst to you, your father and mother are fighting. Because mom's tired of being at Grand Central Station and she's ready to move to town or go somewhere else and be off the main yard. Oh no. But dad, he's happy. He just wants to die with his boots on where he is. And so if your parents are not agreed, you're not going anywhere. And conflict resolution happens when needs are not aligned. And so, how do you find out what people are needing, thinking, feeling, and wanting? First step, and this happened to a woman from Iowa. Her name's Melissa. She said, Elaine, my dad's 70, but we're just not getting a plan done. And I'm in another state, but I want to move closer and I want to be farming with my dad. And my mom wants to move to town. So here's what Melissa did. She actually wrote a letter, Shaun, to her parents and said, by a week from now, once you've read this letter, here's my dream, here's my vision. This is how I would like to farm with you. And my husband and kids are willing to come with me. Can we get this started?
Mm.
And that was the tipping point. You know, the book by Malcolm Gladwell, Tipping Point?
Yeah.
So we all have to have tipping points in our life. And this is a happy tipping point because she was very clear about what she wanted and needed and by when. And when her father realized that she'd already started looking at houses for the mom, then things kind of got into this momentum. And so, what are people afraid of? Why are we having conflict avoidance? Because people are afraid of conflict. But I do conflict for a living, and I just want people to understand who are listening to this. Brene Brown, famous podcaster, says, being clear is kind. So, can you be clear in telling your parents what you want? And can you wait to hear back from your parents in a family meeting about what they want? And then can just start taking the steps to solutions. But the first step after you've put yourself out there is, where's the money going to come from? And this podcast is sponsored by the Royal Bank. So here we go. Your farm is now worth north of 30 million because of the land and all this stuff. But if you go into your Royal Bank tax-free savings account and your RSPs and all the savings and different stuff, you're humiliated to tell me that you have less than $50,000 on your personal wealth side? What was that about? Well, that was because, Elaine, we like the farm, we know the farm, we just keep putting everything back in the farm. And so all you need to do is draw a cross on a piece of paper, put all your farm assets on the left-hand side, and put your other assets, your personal ones, on the right-hand side, and therein lies a key issue.
Yeah.
We are embarrassed to tell you, Shaun, we'd love you to come back, honey, but mom and dad just don't have anything to give you unless you buy us out or buy something. So, Shaun, what are you planning on buying?
Well, it's hard to buy land.
Yep, so that's kind of off the table now, isn't it? And that's heartbreaking because people love land, but they need access to land for the farm. But young people, young farmers cannot technically usually buy very much land. So then what's next? Equipment,
But if I
livestock.
don't, yeah, but then like that's so I'm putting money in a depreciating asset.
Well,
That's a problem.
yeah. And does someone in your family have an off-farm job?
Right.
Because the off-farm job's going to leverage family living. Oh, what's that about? Well, family living is about 80 grand, 84 grand. And I was just in the States this week, and the young the man from the farm management group, it's called Farm Office, lovely name, Farm Office in Ohio State. He said, Elaine, we're now using $90,000 as family living in Ohio. So anybody listening to this say, oh no, we can live on $30,000. No, that's not
No.
true. You actually haven't checked the numbers lately. So you have young families who need to live and buy groceries and diapers. You have older families who want to step back without stepping away. And what's the common denominator here? Money. So here's my new encouragement to the listeners. The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. It's our new favorite book on our coaching team. 3 of us are reading it. But it's interesting when you look at the difference between being wealthy and being rich. And many farmers are actually wealthy already, Shaun, because they have freedom with their time, but they might not necessarily consider themselves rich because you always hear farmers say, I'm asset rich and cash.
Poor.
Yeah. And they're cash poor because they haven't paid attention to the right-hand side of that ledger, which is their personal wealth. So then get thee to a financial planner, because if you're listening to this at 60, it's a lot different of how much time you have on your side for compounding and different investing and saving and whatnot, or tax-free savings account. That's the other thing. I'm still meeting farmers who don't even know tax-free savings accounts exist because they've never used them,
Mm.
right? So
Mm.
I'm a home economist by degree. I want families to have amazing quality of life. And so what the family needs to do is sit down and say, this is what we need to live on. this is where we're going to live. Oh, I just saved $500,000 because I don't need to buy a condo in Strathmore or a new house. I'm staying put. Okay, mom and dad, if you're staying put, then we have to find living that's close to the action of the farm, depending on
Yeah.
what kind of farm it is, right? Now, are these conversations going to kill you, Shaun? No. But then the word's going to come up, but what do we do with your sisters in Calgary? Or what
Right.
do we do with your brother who's in the oil patch in Drumheller or
Yeah.
whatever? And so that then behooves the fairness conversation, which listeners can go to my YouTube channel and just Google finding fairness in farm transition, which I did in 2018. It's had over 4,000 views, which for me is a big deal. Anyway, the whole point is, how transparent are you as a family around the finances and where the finances are flowing?
Most are not.
Exactly.
I
And
have.
even I just met somebody this week who's um yeah, I don't want to say too much about being identifying of this person, but let's just say this person is already at midlife and doesn't have a very good understanding of his personal net worth because the finances have always been cloistered with the older generation.
Yeah. So Elaine, like you've hit on a number of points that are going to resonate with a lot of people viewing or listening and saying, "Ah, yeah, it's not kind of like our situation." And you
Mhm.
can see very quickly how procrastination happens. There's a lot of reasons to just not bring it up, not talk about it. It's just, you know what? Honestly, it'd be easier just to focus on seeding and harvest and calving because this other thing, it just creates conflict.
But
And
why do you say it creates conflict, Shaun? Why does it have to create conflict?
because no one's
Create
really because
understanding.
no one's really talking. And so like I'm you know, I think what happens is that it's the it's like actually the potential of conflict. It's like it's just easier if we don't talk about it. And if I do bring it up, even if I am approaching it in a very like, not hammering or assertive manner, just like sort of like poking around the edges, so to speak, I may not get the I may get a reaction that creates a situation where I don't want to have to deal with that after impact. And so it's just easier to park it in the trees and listen to my spouse bug me about the fact I haven't brought it up. Right? I think there's a lot like you're laughing because you're like, yeah,
It's called beaking. You're getting beaked in this
I'm
area.
getting beaked. I'm tired of being caught in the middle. These
Well, that's a whole
woodpeckers
other
are.
thing. Being caught in the middle of the conflict triangle. And I have had many women say, Elaine, he's coming in this door, my husband's coming in this door, my son's coming in this door, and I'm tired of
Yeah.
being in the. So who's the main driver? So the question then becomes, Shaun, I think this is one of Dick Whitman's terms, who's the driver of the process?
Mm.
And I'm working with a family right now where the daughter, who's also the CFO of the farm, is the driver of the process. And I had to convince her parents that I was a decent person to work with and I could actually create some change. But again, we don't want cancer, heart attack, stroke, accidents, death to be the driver of the process. So if you don't want that, you have to decide, are you really too busy? Are you really overwhelmed? And how do you chunk this down? And so as a coach, I'm trying to tell the listeners, this doesn't have to be overwhelming. You don't have to do it alone. So in our system, we work with the entire family. We interview every couple separately first to find out what they're thinking, feeling, needing, wanting. We use an actual audit that they self-assess what their issues are. The farmer today, he checked off 32 things. And then he said, Elaine, I don't want to upset people, but I need my voice to be heard. And you see,
Mm.
farmers love to fix things, right? And
Yeah.
they love to say, I did that myself.
Practical people. Yeah.
Yes, very pragmatic. And that's all good. Love you, people. But the problem is you're prideful and stubborn. And if you can't do it yourself, you say, well, I'm just not going to do it. But here's the thing, you can't keep not doing it because the more proactive you are. I just did a podcast with a wonderful guy. He's called The Financial Bloke. He's from Australia. His name's Ben Law.
Mm.
His sweet spot, Shaun, is working with farmers who are 45 to 55 because he wants people to be proactive, not reactive, right? The farmers I'm typically working with are anywhere from 60 to 95. My oldest client died a month after working with him because he was 96. So people say, this is what people say, Elaine, it's too anxiety producing and I'm too overwhelmed. Okay, what is it that's overwhelming you? I don't know where to start. Okay, I've given you some ideas about that, but we'll walk alongside you. Elaine, I'm afraid of conflict. Okay, but we'll keep it safe and respectful. Do you see what I'm doing
Oh,
here?
yeah, absolutely.
So whenever you're telling me what your biggest fear is, I'm going to tell you what the other outcome is or what the other possibility looks like. And when I asked a woman today, how are you feeling after this hour with me? This is the mom. And she said, I said, how are you feeling? Are you feeling light? And she says, Elaine, I'm just feeling grateful that we're actually going to get something done.
Mm. We'll get back to the Mind Your Farm Business podcast conversation with Elaine Froese shortly, but first a word from our sponsor, RBC Royal Bank.
This episode of Mind Your Farm Business podcast is brought to you by RBC. No matter where you're at in your agricultural career, succession has probably crossed your mind. Whether you have an idea to help the next generation thrive or just want to get a head start, RBC can help tailor a succession plan for you. Ensure that ownership of your operation, as well as your skills and knowledge, are easily passed on. Visit rbc.com/succession to learn more.
Again, talk, the Chinese proverb is, talk does not cook rice, because you and I talk all the time. But what actually happens as a result of our talking, hopefully people take this podcast to heart and say, you know what, I'm going to give it another shot. And the other thing is, Rick Maurer wrote this book, Why Don't You Want What I Want? And that's the problem when spouses my age in the late 60s and early 70s actually want different things. So there has to be a negotiation in the marriage. And then there has to be a negotiation in the business.
Yeah.
Because do all the business players, the shareholders of the business, like Ian and Wes, will always be father-son, but now they're equal joint venture partners, but they're different ages. Yes,
Yep.
they're partners. Do they still want the same things and at the same time?
You know, Elaine, okay, so when we're talking about, busting through the procrastination and all that, like one thing that's come to my attention is trying to better understand what's enabling and creating the procrastination. Because if you figure that, because I think a lot of times, like if I look at the disc profile, I'm an ID, right? So I'm like, I'm always thinking about new ideas. I'm creative, but I'm also got some driver in me. And I can be a victim of my own personal procrastination, but when in sort of issue management, my D comes out, and so it's like let's just mow through this. Like, stop procrastinating. Let's just get going. But sometimes you got to step back and understand. Okay, mom and dad don't want to talk about this, or my brother doesn't want to talk about it, or my sister doesn't. Whoever that stakeholder is, it doesn't really matter. But trying to understand from their perspective what's creating that level of procrastination. Is that fair?
Yeah, and so the book I mentioned, Why Don't You Want What I Want? Because we all have different personalities. I can't remember what my disc profile is, but I am an influencer. So I'm really good for people. I'm really good for getting stuff done.
Yep.
I suck at detail, which is why I'll never be a bookkeeper or do a lot of cognitive detail stuff for the
You
farm.
and I both.
Yeah, so that's great because we can outsource that. So, but the pushback, so if we touch our head, it's intellectually not understanding that the tactics of legal and accounting and stuff, that comes after. The first part is up here in the big part of the funnel. And I like to think of a tin Princess Auto oil funnel, a really big one.
Mm.
And up here is the communication and the collection of ideas and wishes and wants and needs and the vision for the farm. Like, what are we trying to create here? And what do we want our legacy to be when all is said and done? But when you get down here to legal and accounting, that's tactics. So part of the procrastination, Shaun, I think we mentioned before we started taping, was invoice fatigue.
Yep.
I had this lovely couple that I'm also coaching that has somebody exiting from the farm. And they said, Elaine, the lawyer gave us a bill for 7 grand and she didn't create anything new. She just regurgitated everything we gave her. And I said, yeah, that really hurts, doesn't it? So invoice fatigue is a new term that a group I'm working with is using because farmers are getting invoice fatigue. They don't want to be gouged. They don't mind paying a fair exchange, fair exchange of money for value if there's an outcome, right? So that's the intellectual piece, but also the newsflash there is when you're working with a financial planner, fee for service is really good. And if you're working with a lender or anybody that's going to give you a bill for some reason, ask them what the ranges be. Can you give me some idea of what this is going to cost to get done what I want to get done? The next part of pushback is emotional. And here's the problem, Shaun. 80% of decisions are emotional ones, which is the work of Pierrette Desrochers, who's a clinical psychologist and a farm coach in Quebec. But also, if you read The Psychology of Money, guys drive Ferraris and rich fancy cars for a reason, because they want people to think a certain way about them. But this guy who wrote the book, Morgan, used to be the valet for said fancy cars, and he knew that those guys weren't really that happy. He was more interested in the car, not the guy. So what emotional decisions are we making? And people are afraid of stirring up emotion in family dynamics because they know that they may have promised something as an inheritance or a cascading of wealth to the next generation, and they know that that's no longer possible. And so they're afraid to tell the truth, right? And then the last part of pushback is trust. And here's the deal. Founding people, particularly farm men, are deathly afraid and terrified of their sons and daughters screwing up, but they don't have the guts to tell them that's what they're afraid of. So they just go and criticize, and they criticize some more, and then we can't do this, we can't do this, or no, we can't sit down and have a plan, because they've got this worked up in their brain. The story they're telling themselves is, if I transfer too much too soon or at all until I die, then they're going to lose the whole farm. And I go, Charlie, your son and daughter have been with you for 20 years. This is not going to happen. But Charlie does not believe that, Shaun, because trust. So you just have to think of head, heart, gut, intellectual understanding, emotional, I don't like how this feels, or I don't trust you that it's going to work. So then the question becomes, where's that procrastination planted? Is it planted in not understanding shareholder loans and agreements and estate freezes and all the great things accountants and lawyers can do for you? Or is it the emotion around, well, who am I if I can't call this farm mine anymore?
Yeah. Ugh. So many roadblocks, but honestly, so many opportunities to do it better.
Yeah. Just take the next step. Like, you're not going to say sitting in your field, like the fields here now are black, and today I still want to go for a walk because it's 6 above and there's semis moving and there's seed moving, and it's spring. It's officially spring now. But when farmers start hearing water run, stuff really happens, because then they know it's serious, right? But you'll never see a farmer pull his air seeder out to the field and say, well, I just don't feel like planting today. Maybe I'll do it tomorrow. It's never going to happen.
We do have succession planning all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And again, what do you want to be remembered for? Putting your family into chaos, or giving your family a leg up and understanding and clarity and equity now while they need it and while they can enjoy it? Like these poor guys that I'm meeting are 60-year-old, Shaun, and they tell me, I only owned this, Elaine, for 5 years because my grandfather was 85 and he just hung up to the bit of ear. And I hate those stories. I'm sick and tired of it.
But the challenge to somebody in that situation though is, let's break the cycle.
Yes,
Break the cycle. Like
absolutely.
don't repeat just because that's what's happened to you. Learn from that and say, I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to do it, and I'll just classify it the right way, or a more proper
A
way,
good way.
a good way of doing it. Break the cycle.
The other thing that is niggling in older farmers is some twisted idea that the next generation has to suffer. And when Wes came back to this farm, it had been handled by an employee for 5 years. It was rack and ruin. He's newly minted from college. His father gives him the keys to the farm literally when he's 22 years old. So he's managing from a very young age. So our son comes back from college and he steps into a beautiful farm. So where is it written that our son needs to suffer because he just happens to be in a different time and place? And you see, that's the other thing, is the other conflict is around the next generation working differently than the grandfathers.
Yeah.
Because the grandfathers are workaholics. The grandfathers have seen a lot more up and down in the economy. But Shaun, you just look at the markets and commodity prices and looking back for the last 6 or 7 years. Like it's not the younger farmers' fault that they've had this amazing run. But now, of course, we're in a course correction and things are happening, and people say, well, we can't afford to do this. Things are too tight already. Well, you can still afford to talk to each other, and you can still afford to be good at conflict resolution, and you can still afford to create ideas. It costs nothing to sit at a table and say, this is what I would like to do with the farm over the next 5 years, and this is how I would like to do it. That just costs you time and attention and appreciation for what has come before you. Please don't forget to say thank you both ways, always. Because lack of appreciation, pride and stubbornness, it's my way or the highway, and lack of forgiveness for screwing up, because everybody makes mistakes and that's how we learn.
Yeah. Well
So we
put.
got lots of culture to deal with here, Shaun. Like, and I'm concerned about the mental wellness. I've just spent this last week with a bunch of dairy farmers in Maine and 250 women in Ohio. And they text me everything about, what they need to see shifting. And quite frankly, they're overwhelmed and they're tired and they don't see hope and they don't see opportunity. But I always say counseling is about recovery. So if you need a therapist for mental wellness, do that. But coaching is about discovering how you want to take the whole farm team to go forward. And you don't have to do that by yourself.
Well put. Elaine, this is such an important topic. I always love chatting with you, and I think we really dove in here to the battle against procrastination and the way to make advancements on this topic of farm transition and succession and do it in a respectful way that at the end of the day, there's a business and people are still talking to each other on farm and off farm. So I really
And
appreciate your input and
I'll
your
just
expertise.
close. I just have to say one more thing. April is just around the corner. April is Will's month. And I am flabbergasted, Shaun, how many wealthy farmers I am still meeting
Yeah.
who don't think they need a will. So, folks, before you get on the land, call your lawyer, get a simple will or get the first draft done, work on the draft and docu-sign it while you're busy once you've both agreed that this is the way you want your will to be, and also your power of attorney. And these are simple. They don't have to be super expensive. If it's not too complex, you can get a decent will done between $400 and $600 per person, possibly. And if you need help to do this, just go to Elaine at ElaineFroese.com or Farm Family Coach. Reach out to me. I will send you my Wills with Joy folder, and I'll give you some tools to get that started. Again, guess what? If you start doing this and you say, "Hey, I got a will," people are going to say, "Ooh, what's in the will?" Now you've started something, haven't you?
The mystery
Yes.
continues. Elaine, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, nice to hear your voice, Shaun. All the best. Take care.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Mind Your Farm Business podcast. A huge thanks to Elaine Froese. Such great practical wisdom, candid advice on tackling farm transition and succession planning just head on. As Elaine reminded us, avoiding the conversation doesn't make the problem go away. It makes it just harder to solve later. I love that. Succession planning doesn't have to be overwhelming, and you don't have to do it alone. Start small, have open discussions, and focus on clarity, fairness, and financial security for everyone involved. And remember, April is Wills Month. If you don't have a will in place, now's the time to take action. For more resources, visit ElaineFroese.com or check out her Wills with Joys material. And if you're looking for more episodes of the Mind Your Farm Business podcast, go to mindyourfarmbusiness.com. Brand new landing page. Please check it out. If you have any thoughts or questions, feel free to reach out to me at shaney@realagriculture.com or call 855-776-6147. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep on minding your farm business.